Thanks for joining us on Lincoln Fire and Rescue. I'm Dale Johnson. Appreciate you watching 5 City TV. We've had our share of storms lately, but long before storm clouds roll in, the Lancaster County Emergency Management Agency, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, and area ham radio operators are ready, just in case. On Lincoln Fire and Rescue today, a behind-the-scenes look and informational discussion about preparing for storms with Jim Davidsaver, Director of Emergency Management, and LFR Battalion Chief Brad Thavenet. Jim, Brad, thank you very much, guys, for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And we picked, at least as taping, a rain-free day, sunny day. Being prepared can be an overused and often non-accurate term about readiness for a storm, because people may say they're prepared, but when I ask, do you have fresh batteries in your radio? They say no. When I asked about blankets or a coordinated location during a storm or after a storm, they say no. So Jim, what does being prepared mean to you and your department?
The general rule that we use is we encourage people to be as self-sufficient as possible for 3 days. We refer to it as the 72-hour rule. So some of those things that you mentioned, does the radio have fresh batteries? Do I have a 3-day supply of water? If I'm on medication at the time, do I have a 3-day supply of that medication? So those that live under your roof, within your immediate family, in your household, that's what you want to make plans for. So not just your human inhabitants, but again, don't forget the pets. You know, do we have a 3-day supply of pet food? Things along those lines. And I try to preach awareness, that we don't want people to get paranoid. We just want you to pay attention to what's going on. When we're in severe weather season, again, those things, have you checked to make sure that your NOAA weather radio is working properly? If you live in Lancaster County, great. If you have family, relatives that lives in an adjacent county, you can program those counties in as well. So you're literally receiving up-to-the-minute information about severe weather. And a lot of that preparedness is that preparation. That's the nice thing about most of the severe weather we deal with. You will get advance warning. There is a possibility that a storm could literally form in a matter of a few minutes with some pretty significant impacts. For the most part, we're literally going to see it coming. So again, just that thing, just be aware, kind of pay attention to those things. NEMA, Nebraska Emergency Management, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, they've got a lot of very simple checklists to where you can do that. And again, when you're literally checking those boxes off, I have the batteries, I have the radio, I have food, things along those lines, you can consider yourself prepared.
Prescription medications?
Absolutely, correct.
And the reason I bring that up, Brad, is because when emergency crews show up, when they go into a residence or when they check out, there should be a location or some kind of notification, maybe on the refrigerator somewhere, where they're notifying emergency people of medications that might be in the house.
Absolutely, and most people will have, especially the elderly, are very in tune with this, but I even go to family members to know where that elderly person or parent or grandparent may keep that stuff, is just having it in a central identifiable location like a magnet, a file of life that may sit on a refrigerator. But not only is the prescriptions that you may take, but what are some of the health issues that are there. It gives the first responders, the EMTs and paramedics, when they show up, a snapshot of maybe some of the health issues that you aren't able to communicate yourself to the first responders, so that they can look at the signs and the symptoms, make a in-the-field diagnosis and treat prior to arriving at the hospital.
All right, that's how I should be prepared. That's how viewers should be prepared. But you personally, as the head of a department that deals with nothing but emergencies, that could be storms, that could be floods, natural disasters, man-made disasters, what does being prepared within your department mean?
We take the all hazards approach. When something bad happens, we need to be able to respond and recover from that as quickly as possible. So that's what a lot of the coordination and a lot of the operation of the Emergency Operations Center, that we activate in different levels based on the severity of the situation. Level 3 is our lowest level of activation, working up to a full-scale level 1. An example of a level 3 could be Lancaster County has been placed under a severe thunderstorm warning. So the likelihood of severe weather is very high. I don't need to activate the entire EOC I'm in constant communication with Lincoln Fire and Rescue and the other public safety entities out there, so they know that. But that level 3 activation may just be me, a few of my volunteers, the ham radio system that staffs our storm spotter network, again, just to keep an eye on the problem. An example of a level 1 activation, we dealt with that first week of May, when we had to issue a voluntary evacuation order for some of the neighborhoods in Lincoln due to the rising water levels. In that instance, literally every seat at the EOC was full because I wanted to make sure that every agency, every entity was represented there. When I have all those subject matter experts in the same room, we can really effectively manage the situation, respond real time to the current threat, so we can really minimize the overall ill effect.
You look in the dictionary under prepared and there's a firefighter picture. You can't be more prepared than a firefighter. So Brad, run down the readiness list, if you will, figuratively, that LFR prepares ahead of a storm.
Probably one of the biggest things, and you go back to way before a storm even, is just through personnel on staff and training. So if they've got the proper people on shift for any day or additional folks brought in, and the proper training and the proper equipment. Jim mentioned all hazards, and the fire department truly is an all hazard mitigation entity, but it's tough to have resources to combat every hazard you can think of. We only get the 100-year flood like we had in this case once every 100 years. Are we prepared? Do we have all the resources necessary within the fire department to handle that? And the answer would be no. It's impossible to have enough boats to evacuate or heavy vehicles to evacuate or whatever. So the biggest part of preparedness is what Jim mentioned, is the sharing of information. We're in constant contact from a public safety side with Jim and the EOC of the storm coming in. What's it look like? Do I need more folks to come in on shift? Am I going to get heavy rains? And then as he activates and goes up to his level 1, he'll get all the players in there. So as an individual in the field, he becomes a place to go for resources. So if I don't have those within the fire department, knowing that network of resource allocation or accommodation where I can get a hold of some of the sheriff's department's MRATs like we used that day, or Public Works' dump trucks or something, just to get people moved out of there that might be high water vehicles to get out. I don't house those, don't need them every day on the fire department, but that preparation ahead of time of networking, having all the departmental heads represented at the EOC with Jim, then it becomes just a phone call away, because we set a person down there as our representative on the fire department, as does Public Works and PD, so in street and everything you can think of. So it's almost a coordinated effort down there that Jim puts on down there that allows us to get resources in the field that helps us be prepared if he decides we really need to evacuate this, but where do we go? Do they have the medicines like we talked about earlier to get those, and how do I get them once I get them out of the flooded area? Where do we house them? And that's what he's working through there, providing that information. I think it's that coordinated effort is truly the part of preparedness that people aren't familiar with that goes on when they see a fire truck go down the street with all the nice shiny bells and whistles, which is absolutely true. They're prepared to do that, but on a bigger scale, how do we do it behind the scenes so that we can combat this in a very efficient manner?
And that's the way I like to characterize emergency management. I don't tell you how to do your job. I ask you, how can I help you do your job better? So the examples that Brad mentioned there, LFR, they know their job, they know what they need to do. Do they have the resources? Do they have the equipment to do it? If not, that's when they can reach out to emergency management.
What's lost, I think, this table isn't big enough to hold the people that both of you coordinate with. We could have Public Works here, we could have LSO here, we could have the university here, we could have other city entities. The mayor's office needs to know what's going on. We could fill half of this room with the people who need to know at the moment something, or in advance of something happening.
And that brings up a very good point, too, that our current Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, has 28 workstations. And each one of those has identified a specific individual, the fire department, the police department, the sheriff's office, the health department. So when we have all those entities represented in that level 1 activation, we're not the policymakers. We are the operations. We are what needs to be done right now. And that's the other way I like to characterize it. Everything we do, we want to do the most good for the most people. Obviously, life safety issues are first and foremost. We don't like to see anybody's property get damaged, But again, if it comes down to saving a life versus moving a vehicle that could get flooded, we've got to go life safety first. So again, it's kind of that prioritization, but when we have all those workstations in the EOC staffed, I have the subject matter experts in that same room that Brad knows his job. Dave Thurber from Public Works knows his job. Pam Dingman from the county engineer knows her job. Again, literally having all those people in the same room really gives us an incredible power to deal with whatever that emergency may be.
And I think a prime example of that night back in May, we were assisting out in the county with a individual that was washed off the road out there that was flooded and water was coming up. And just with the coordinated effort through calling on the radio back to the EOC, to our representative there, county engineer provided us with the path of travel, the roads that were washed out, because they were getting information from the sheriff's department, who was also out in the county, telling all of that, where we weren't just going down roads in the middle of the night trying to turn around at 4 in the morning, trying to come back another way because it wasn't drivable. All that coordination of field observers feeding back to the emergency operations center just aids to a faster, more efficient, safer model of mitigating a problem, and in that case, rescuing somebody that was obviously going to be swept away.
And fast is important. Most viewers have probably never seen a flood or been in a flood. It can change so quickly. A road that wasn't underwater can be underwater, or one that looks like it's a little film of water can turn into a foot of water that can strand a vehicle.
And that brings up a very good point, and that's why, you know, all of the media information that's been pushed out, the saying about, you know, don't drown, turn around. It may be a road or a street that you're familiar with. You drive down it a couple of times a day going to and from work, to and from home, but literally just a few inches of water, especially if it's moving quickly, can literally make all the difference in the world. And unfortunately, there were some tragic examples of that in Texas recently, where people were trying to navigate their way through some running water like that, even in vehicles, were washed away.
And I think even to bring it closer to home, I may get the number misspoke, but I think Director Esposito of Public Works mentioned in excess or in the number of 100 manhole covers had just floated away just due to the pressure of water below the street, lifted them up, and now you don't see them as a car. You drive by and drop a wheel off that, and you're stuck in the moving water that's rising out there. So
I believe, Brad, a fire truck or engine had some front end damage. Don't know if that was a manhole cover off
that
or whether
was,
that was a
somebody
pothole.
had dug a culvert behind their business to drain some water away, and as they drove, they're unable to see the road, can't see all the way down, and just due to that kind of a ditch they did to drain the water away from their private business caused the front end to drop down and do some bumper damage to the front end that night. Yep.
Jimmy mentioned the EOC. There is such a wow factor with the EOC. I've seen the old and I've been in the new, and it's night and day. And we're going to talk about the Spotters Network. So skilled, trained people are critically important. Boy,
Correct.
good equipment sure helps. Talk about, visualize for viewers the EOC.
Yeah, it's actually in the basement of the old police department. 233 South 10th, pretty unassuming building from the outside, but inside is all business. And like I said, taking advantage of the technology, I've got a few still photos that I can share that shows what it looks like when it's fully operational. But yeah, the overhead projectors, the 28 workstations that we have there, allows anybody in the room to share the information they're looking at. We have a member from the incident dispatch team, a specially trained dispatcher from the 911 center, can staff a workstation there. So real time, we can look at all the public safety calls for service. Lincoln Police, Lancaster County Sheriff, Lincoln Fire and Rescue. At a glance, it will tell you what resources you have available, how many sheriff's deputies are on duty, how many fire crews are on duty, what are they doing now, and most importantly, the pending queue. What are those calls for service that have come in, requests for help that are waiting to go out? And obviously all of those are prioritized. If it's a barking dog, it's going to go to the bottom of the list. If it's a report of a vehicle that has just been washed into the ditch, that's the highest priority, obviously. But again, as Brad made mention to it, just that coordinated effort. Everybody real time is updated. We know exactly what's going on. With a weather event too, we're always interested in the duration. How much rain have we got and how much rain are we supposed to get? What is that going to do to the streets and the roads throughout the county? So as we do need to close some roads, suggest detours, How can we get that information about? We were able to adapt something from just last week. The City of Lincoln Public Works, they already maintain a road closure map. 27th and O, the construction project going on there, is an excellent example. You look at that, you see that red X at that intersection, it suggests detour routes. Well, we were able to use the GIS technology available to update that real-time countywide, get information out about all the roads that are closed due to high water. So again, one of those things, especially when we can focus the media, the general public, to one source of information, they know it's coming straight from City of Lincoln Public Works, Lancaster County Engineer. I understand how important information is. The time factor is critical, but to me it's more important to get it right. I have to make sure that the information going out is correct. It's as accurate as it can be, but again, if we can focus people towards a simple site like that, we know we had a significant amount of rain overnight. What roads are open, what roads are closed.
And the more eyes on a situation, the better, and the big screen televisions come in, so
Correct.
everyone sees the same thing. Isn't that awesome, Brad?
It's a great, and even during event, but even the forecasting and predicting of future events. And one thing I know we relied heavily on, and they were able to pull it up on just, it looks like a giant blank wall with multiple screens going on there projected, is the Lower Platte Natural Resources District. If I needed to know how high the water was and the speed of flow, they could pull it up, they could charge, say, hey, in about this X amount of time frame, you're going to have a significant event happening here. So if you have a call waiting in the queue, like Jim mentioned, this may take high priority because water is coming that way. And so they were able to pull it up on the screen to look at flow patterns through the meters that are out there gauging the flow that's coming down, and then predict what the events would be like maybe in 10 minutes or a half hour or 30 minutes, and even go back to the engineer who would pull up the road closure and say, you're going to get high water, it's going to be here in about 30 minutes, what roads will it affect? The engineer looks at their screen, and it's just a very, very nice waltz, if you will, of information sharing and personnel providing information, forecasting information, and then most importantly, as Jim mentioned, getting it out to the people in the field that do the most good with it.
You have the most water experience, the most skill of anybody at this table. Tell us how impressive in a potentially dangerous way that May storm was, water coming so fast for so long.
Water, it's predictable. You know it's going to rise. You know it's going to be fast and go. Probably the biggest thing is complacency we have here in Lincoln. We're not used to the canyons of Colorado and the whitewater rapids that people may go on vacation. And it's never happened here in most people's lifetimes. They've never seen Salt Creek come up like that. They've never had that. So it's never going to happen to me, so you get complacent, you don't take it serious, and then all of a sudden you're stuck in it. And when the velocity or the movement of that water doubles, it puts a force on your vehicle, your house, yourself of 4 times. And so that little stream, as you stand there, is pushing against your legs, and you can go. Here comes that rush of water from the rain of Beatrice now moving. Speeds come up a little bit, and now that force on you is taking you and your vehicle, your house, shifting everything. And what people don't see is everything below the water. You know, you try to walk through it to get something out of your house, and now your foot's stuck in a grate, your foot's stuck in the lattice work, and the water is rising. And so those are the things that people I don't think about, or the hazardous chemicals. I go back to the propane tanks floating around on West O Street that day that they're held by gravity. No one would have thought water would come up and cause that thing to want to float towards the stadium and to the railroad trestles. So I think just the relentless nature of water, you're not going to dam that up or control it. You just got to learn to respect it is probably more. Jim mentioned, don't drive through it, don't turn around, don't drown. Respect, because it may be moving, and it may have enough force just to move you right off the road into the ditch, which is going to be deeper water, and now you've got a real catastrophic event coming.
Water moved rail cars in West O. How much or how little water does it take to move a car? Doesn't take much.
It will say about 3 to 6 inches. We'll start it to hydroplane, which will now break the surface of your tires against the pavement and get you off. A foot of moving water will start to move your vehicle off, and you start to get more than a foot with the velocity. It will literally take you right off the road. The individual that got swept off.
About, there's my hand, about that much.
And you add some flow to that, and we all know every car now, a lot of the new ones are all low, pro, aerodynamic. And that's so you don't sit too high off of the ground, and so now you're stranded and it's starting to come in your doors. We had multiple people in intersections, just their cars would just stall out, water was in the engine, and it's now rising up as they sit there. The gentleman that got swept off the road down south, a pickup went through, he saw the pickup go, thought he could make it too in a smaller little compact car, took him clean off the road out in the middle of a cornfield. And so a good probably 50 yards off the road being washed, just floating away.
Jim, let's give props to the Spotters Network.
Absolutely.
One of the organizations I heard about when I first came to Lincoln 31 years ago was the network of ham radio operators and other skilled individuals who span out across the county. So talk about this team that makes up the system of spotters like no other in the country.
Correct, yeah. We partner with the Lincoln Amateur Radio Club, and I understand they have close to 400 certified members who have their ham radio license, and of that close to 400, better than 170 of them have been through the state certified storm spotter course. Each year it's offered during UNL's Severe Weather Symposium. So I was there that Saturday. It was the same day as the spring game. We didn't have 76,000 people at our Severe Weather Symposium, but the auditorium where the lecture and the test was offered was a capacity crowd. And again, they're all volunteers that do that. One of the workstations in the EOC is the ham radio base, to where when a severe weather event is coming into the county, we activate them as need be. We've identified 35 spots throughout the county that give us that best vantage point. If severe weather is moving into the area, they will have eyes on it. And again, they go through that certification process. Are they looking at a simple wall cloud that doesn't pose a severe threat versus a mesocycle, something that could literally spin into a tornado? So those are things to keep in mind. And again, I'm in constant communication with all of those storm spotters that are out through the ham radio volunteer that staffs the workstation in the EOC. So I had an exposure to this during several activations last fall, and then the ones that we've been through so far this season. We are very fortunate to have that group of volunteers that literally put themselves in harm's way to keep an eye on things, and that's part of the process. A question I often get is, when do you sound the tornado sirens? Well, the National Weather Service, the subject matter expert, if they issue a tornado warning for Lincoln and Lancaster County, I will sound all 103 sirens in the network. The other one, if we have a tornado on the ground that is verified by 2 storm spotters, I will sound the sirens as well. And the county is broken up into 5 geographic areas: northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest, and then the city of Lincoln occupies that 5th zone through the middle. So I can activate the sirens in one zone, in multiple zones, or all 5 zones throughout the county. It's dictated by where is that severe weather.
What's impressive too are the layers of verification. There's some vectoring going on. If I'm not sure
Correct.
I'm using the proper term, but if spotter A thinks he or she sees a tornado, there are other locations then that will check
Correct.
From their point whether they see the same thing.
Right, and again, that's where I said if it comes down to that point where it hasn't reached the threshold where the National Weather Service is going to issue that warning, again, always erring on the side of life safety. If there is severe weather, if there's a tornado that poses an immediate threat, we want to sound those outdoor warning sirens to give people as much notice as possible.
And other counties and other emergency agencies around the country try to replicate this, but we've had it in place so long and it does its job so well that we're so far ahead of the game in this.
And again, I'd like to think that's something that people don't take for granted. But again, it's also a lot of that work is behind the scenes. You know, again, they are volunteers doing it on their own time, this and that, and putting themselves potentially in harm's way for the greater good. So I've been very impressed with the system.
It's impressive, isn't
It
it?
is, and I got to give kudos because not only during storm events, we utilize the ham system of radio operators during the Lincoln Marathon. They'll sit within the command post, and one will be at every aid station and out on the course providing information. Everything is information driven in our world, as we all know, and the more we can gather, you know, the safer the events are and stuff like that. So they are out and about, very active group, and hats off to them because they are, as Jim said, all volunteers they go out and do this and have a passion and love for it. So
And the other thing about it too is the redundancy, the layers of it, that if conventional means of communication go down, I think people probably have that expectation. If I pick up the phone, I'm going to get a dial tone. If I pull out my cell phone, no matter where I am in the county, I've got coverage. I can make a call. Again, if the system is down, the radio system that the hams have will always go through. An excellent example of that is even if the 911 center goes down, its inability to take a 911 call, that's when we can deploy our hams to those strategic locations, because again, the network, those radio waves are always going to go through.
Well, for everyone who thought that 100-year flood you mentioned, but we've had 2 of those. Fall of last year in October, and now we've had one in May. What are we, 200 years up on those floods? So, and you learn from those experiences, don't you, Jim and Brad? What
Yes.
worked and what maybe didn't work quite as well.
I think if we don't go, and which we have, don't go back and assess what worked and more importantly what didn't work so we can make it better the next time and a more efficient model for the citizens, we don't do our job. And shortly thereafter we got all the pertinent individuals that were down in the EOC, and we had an after action about what can we do better next time, the flow of information. Do we need a different technology up on the big screens that are there that would aid us out in the field or aid to do our job in the center better? So if you're not learning all the time, then you're almost stagnating, going backwards. And we definitely, in this case with Jim's folks down there, we're definitely going in the right direction in gathering the stuff and the pertinent players and the technology and putting it to the best use available for the citizens. Absolutely.
It is all about being prepared, and that's what we have been talking about today on Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Jim, thanks a lot for coming
Absolutely,
in.
no,
Jim
certainly.
David Saver, Emergency Management Coordinator. And Brad, thank you very much. Battalion Chief Brad Thavenet, representing Lincoln Fire and Rescue. Thanks, everybody, for being with us today on Lincoln Fire and Rescue on 5 City TV.